Welcome back. It is another episode of All or Nothing. This podcast is brought to you by PedTest Australia and Bulk Gym Chalk. I am joined today by Connor Walsh. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, and also thank you for being here, Alison Craven.
No worries.
If you are unaware of who Alison is, which you won't be because you would have heard the last episode, she is the CEO of PedTest Australia, as well as Bulk Gym Chalk. And also, Connor is a bit of a whiz in the nutrition and powerlifting scene. You may have heard of him. He was like a pretty strong guy at one point.
At one point.
A few years ago.
Quite a few years ago, in another life.
May have also just squatted like 12.5 kilos less than his best ever squat recently.
Yeah, something like that.
Look at that. Look at that. It's the Titan wraps. That's what it is.
That's it.
100%.
That's it.
It's good to be back. Today we are going to explore some of the questions that people have on the internet. And one of the first ones is going to be, what is the difference when it comes to nutrition between people that are on performance-enhancing drugs versus people who aren't? I'm curious about this because I don't do drugs.
Yeah, okay. So there's going to be a few differences. The differences that are there are not going to be in your kind of main principles, as far as energy in, energy out, macronutrient goals. Everything is, your major overarching principles of nutrition are all going to be the same from on and off. There are some smaller, more minutiae parts that will vary when you're trying to really optimize things. For example, there is probably less of a need for dietary fat or for a lower dietary fat intake in an enhanced individual in a caloric deficit setting because one of the functions of the fat is already kind of exogenously taken care of by that performance-enhancing drug user, providing that we're talking about hormones and not just peptides and whatnot. So if that person is already taking hormones, their body is not required, obviously, to produce the hormones. So there is going to be a slightly lower need for fat within the diet in a caloric deficit setting in order to maintain healthy testosterone levels.
I have a question just on that quickly. In reference to, obviously, because I know what my intake's been like recently, it's probably the lowest I've ever had it with some of the stuff we've been working together on. It's really hard because every person's different, but to give an understanding of maybe, let's say you had two different people, and we'll use myself as like the parameter, right? Let's say you had two people about my weight, somewhere between 90 to 95 kilos, and one of them was on performance enhancing drugs. I'm not. My fat sat around about 40, 45 a day.
Yep.
How much can we really see that get much lower just because they're on?
Yeah, look, if obviously your calories are about 2,200 on your lows.
No, that's 1,800.
18. Okay, so
it's bad.
For example, look, so very rarely, there's not too many people are going to have to get to an extreme where they're pushing the calories that low, unless they're a competitive bodybuilder. But maybe a case study of my own. Actually, no, I won't out them just in case they don't want to be aware of that they're using stuff. But a client of mine that we had prep on very low calories recently, we took as low as 40 grams of fat. We did have to get him down to about 1,500 calories a day. One thing I will say is when fat starts to get much lower, especially from a natural individual, it's not necessarily the total grammage, but the composition of that fat. So if you're just sitting there consuming nothing but meat and saturated fats, you're probably not going to put yourself in quite as good of a position as someone who has a rounded fat intake from plant sources like avocado, maybe some from a fatty fish source like some salmon, and then you just saturated fats and whatnot from your meat sources. If you're someone that's just getting everything as a trace fat from their low fat yogurt and from their chicken breast, then they're probably going to require more total fat as opposed to someone who's a little bit more methodical with planning out their fat intake.
Is this information or is this like a direct call out?
I wasn't outing you.
I
wasn't outing you. You just outed yourself.
I haven't had any fat. I haven't had any low fat yogurt today. That's all right. I've had a little bit of low fat yogurt, but
I haven't even checked your diary yet. So you just dived yourself in.
Actually, yeah. When you check it, you're going to see the low fat yogurt in it. I didn't. But at the same time, as you said, it's more about as long as you had that variety in that day. So maybe that person's had some meat, some eggs. And then if you can fit an avocado in on 40 grams of fat a day, that might be difficult.
Look, and another thing to note as well is obviously your fat sources are what's going to provide your fat-soluble vitamins. So your vitamin A, E, K, and D. So you want to make sure that you're also getting sufficient micronutrients in those vitamins from your fat sources as well, because it's not just the fat particularly that you may end up low in, but you may end up low or have a deficiency in one of the fat-soluble vitamins as a byproduct of the low-fat intake. So that's another thing to be wary of if you are kind of pushing into those low-fat ranges as well.
Interesting. And so what are some of the other things that you would say differ between the two?
Well, for a performance-enhancing drug user, especially if we're talking about steroids and growth hormone, some of these can have impacts on the renin, aldosterone, and angiotensin system, which can manipulate water balance, as well as some of the electrolyte balances. Like, for example, growth hormone will retain more sodium, as well as performance-enhancing drug users just typically having a harder time with controlling blood pressure. You might find performance-enhancing drug users will need to have a little bit more of a ability to play around with electrolyte intake in order to modulate blood pressure. Often you'll find maybe potassium and magnesium intake might need to be a little bit higher relative to sodium in performance-enhancing drug users in order to kind of try and stay on top on the upwards pressure on blood pressure that is often, that happens when you hop on steroids and growth hormone. Certain other things like iron may be a consideration as well. Steroids can increase the body's need for iron by increasing the production of red blood cells, which increases the demand on iron. So some people may need to consume more iron, but on the same side, hematocritosis or high red blood cells from a result of too much iron in the body is also something that is semi-common in steroid users as well. Some people just retain a lot more iron from their diet and end up with very high iron and ferritin levels, which then compounds into poor blood counts, high red blood cell, high hematocrit, which then can cause high blood pressure and other things down the line. So that would be one area that you'd want to be getting blood work done to see kind of where your iron intake needs to be so that you can stay on top of things like that.
Interesting. Would you say there's any other major differences?
Look, none of these are per se major. There are other, like zinc intake may be increased when on performance-enhancing drugs, particularly hormones. Look, we could keep going on this for a while, but if we get too deep into this, it's probably going to end up having a full segment on this topic. So I'm happy to answer more questions. If anyone has specific questions that they want answered, feel free to reach out to my DMs, and I'm happy to have a chat with you about it.
Okay, interesting. What do we have next?
We kind of touched on this question quickly in the last episode, but this one's just, is BPC worth it? For the most part, I'm going to say yes. It is quite a fantastic compound in terms of injury recovery and even gut health, but it's not something I particularly recommend as chronic long-term use. The long-term side effects are still not completely known, and a lot of the studies that people go off recommending its efficacy are on body protection compound, not the actual compound BPC 157. There are also some potential for increasing cancer growth rates by upregulating the growth hormone pathway with BPC use. So it's probably something, if you are intending on using it, that you may maybe go and get some cancer checks potentially, or at least have a look at what your family cancer history is before making a decision on using the compound. For the most part, it's very good though, but I would just, I'm starting to see a little bit more popularity with chronic long-term use and not coming off, which is not particularly something that I would recommend.
So is that...
Use as needed.
Use as needed, yeah. Take this over to you, Alison. Do you guys test for peptides at all?
No, we have a growth hormone test kit, but there is no way to do testing for SARMs and peptides yet. I would recommend that if you're going to use peptides, get a sample analysed and make sure you are storing it correctly and that you don't keep it too long, because peptides, as a general rule, are quite unstable. They degrade very easily, particularly if you're buying stuff that, from a not very good source. They may have been sitting around for a while. They may have got hot. They degrade into a multitude of other proteins that interact with each other and then react to create other proteins, and there's this whole chain reaction into all sorts of little nasties. So it's good to get it analysed and, make sure you're storing it correctly and don't keep them for a long time.
So two points on that then. At that point, if you've, say, got something from somewhere and that process has taken place, is it going to be ineffectiveness that would be the consumer's concern, or is there some negative health side effects that you can get? Both. Both boxes ticked on that one. Maybe look into that. And then, I mean, I guess to expand on that in terms of the storage, I've heard this about growth hormone before, and as far as you know, on some of the, you say that you have growth hormone kits. So how would that work then if someone's so just testing their own themselves, sending you the results, but do you see a lot of, I guess, lesser results in terms of good ones?
We've only seen 2 positives since we've started selling the kits.
Do you know how many you've done?
About 50. There could be positives that haven't been reported to us, of course, but in general, growth hormone tends to get switched with analogues and other peptides and could just have nothing in it at all. So there's a whole range of things that it can be swapped with. So legitimate HGH seems to be kind of rare in Australia from what we've seen so far.
Unless Sylvester Stallone brings it in. The shit he's using has to be working, right?
Yeah.
Something's going on.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Connor, what do we have next?
The next question from one of the listeners was to cycle on and off or cruise, and then different ways to PCT. I think this question really comes down to long-term goals. If you're being realistic with ourselves, if you are looking to get kind of to the top end of untested sport, you're not coming off. Having said that realistically, unfortunately, this is not how most people are going to assess it, but realistically, that probably only equates to 1 to 2% of performance-enhancing drug users. A lot of people may see themselves as having a realistic chance or having a dream potentially to compete at that top level. But unfortunately, we kind of know that most people don't make it to that. So we kind of talked about this in the last episode. This is where you're going to really have to kind of be honest with yourself and see where you see this ending up in the long term, and also what you're willing to give up. So obviously fertility and long-term TRT become an issue if you're choosing to stay on for extended periods of time. If kids are something that you're wanting to have in the future, it's something you have to be wary of. There's a good chance that you may end up not being able to have children, and that's going to be a large impact on whether you choose to stay on or come off completely.
What about jumping on and within like maybe 10 to 12 weeks looking like Chris Hemsworth and then getting off? And will I just stay looking like that? What are the chances of that? Not that I'm considering it.
I don't know, you Chris Hemsworth or?
No, I'm not
then
taking no.
Probably not. It's probably not going
I just thought I'd check because I feel like that's probably, there's a few people I think that think of it that way. And then there's obviously the myth of like once you jump on everything that you jump on, you have when you get on, you lose. But to a certain extent, as you've mentioned, and we talked about body dysmorphia, if someone's getting on, chances are, regardless of that, you're either going to be addicted to it and stay on, or you're going to get off and be like, I don't like how I look now that I'm off because I clearly am going to look better when I'm on.
Yep.
So it's kind of a lose-lose unless you're just going to...
Yeah. And look, as far as coming on and coming off, as far as a health point of view, if this is a long-term decision, I do personally think it's safer staying on if we are not considering fertility and long-term TRT. What often happens, especially as you get more advanced, your regression between cycles when you come off completely gets even larger. So what ends up happening is your next cycle becomes even bigger. And you obviously have this big crash of hormone levels between cycles where you come all the way back down to 0 and then you slowly work your way up, hopefully, to a somewhat normal testosterone level. That may not happen. You may stay at 0 or just above. But if you're staying on and kind of going between supraphysiological and physiological or just mildly supraphysiological levels, you're able to kind of maintain progress without taking that big step backwards between cycles, which then allows you on the next cycle to not have to be such a large cycle because you haven't gone backwards. You're always kind of just slowly chipping forwards rather than having these big swings. And as I said, if this is a long-term goal, eventually your regression, you'll get to a point that's just so far past your natural kind of sticking point or what your body's able to maintain with natural hormone levels that when you come off, you're just going to lose too much, and then it's just putting you too far behind the 8 ball that next time when you get on, you're playing catch up. And one, it's not going to work very well in terms of being competitive, and two, I see more negative health outcomes coming from that by just having to abuse compounds effectively in order to make up what you lost.
Interesting. Things to consider.
In terms of you're making a choice, or if you're choosing to stay on, or
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just popularised now, and these are the things that aren't popular when they're being talked about, right? It's just like seeing 2 people with big, thick backs training in stringlets and being like, fuck yeah, that's sort of worth it, jump on, and it's being, a lot of young people are thinking of it, where maybe I'm getting old. I look at that and I'm like, I just have too many health concerns. And that maybe just makes me like an old person, you know what I mean? Not that they're dangerous, but to me, I'm just happy with where I'm at as well, I think. Maybe I'm happy being at that level, and I think maybe a lot of people aren't really interested in just trying to see what they can do naturally. Some people are incredible natural athletes,
sure.
and some people look amazing when they do it too. So I think, once again, being 17 years old and considering it seems a bit weird, and that's probably becoming a lot more common now.
Of course, that's another thing as well. If you're getting later in life, then the fact you probably, you're going to have a harder time coming off. The older you get, you're less likely to have a favourable reaction to coming off and restarting your HPTA. And obviously, as we know, testosterone levels decline as you get older. So as you get older, you may be looking into TRT anyway. And if that's the case, then that kind of helps with the decision, makes things a little bit easier. I am an advocate for TRT for most people. I honestly don't see why anyone would not want to maintain healthy and optimal hormonal levels throughout the entirety of their life and increase, in the most cases, well-being and life quality. But yeah, age is definitely going to be something you're going to consider. If you're already thinking about TRT and you're not like, maybe just want a little bit of a increase in training performance, maybe just TRT is what's for you. Maybe the cycle isn't what you're after. Maybe just hopping on TRT or sports TRT, where you're slightly above, physiological levels, 200, 250 milligrams of testosterone. That might be all you need. That might be what you need to kind of just get through that little plateau, increase, your well-being, if you're starting to get some of those low testosterone-like symptoms. And for a lot of people, it just gets enjoyment in the gym going again. Not that I'm, advocating this, but there are people, been training for 10, 15 years, things are getting a bit stale, they're 35, they're just not seeing progress in the gym anymore. They're not particularly wanting to hop on a big steroid cycle, but they want to continue progressing something. This is where, sports TRT, without needing to do any crazy, steroid cycle on top of it, maybe just, exactly what they're looking for.
And also, if you do decide to, just make sure that you take the TRT that you do get and go get it tested by Pet Test Australia, right?
If it's made by a compounding pharmacy, yes.
If it's made by a compounding pharmacy. I was just trying to lead it. You get what I was doing there, all right? Get your stuff tested. All right, what do we got next?
All righty. The next one is a bit of a longer question. If you've got time for it.
Oh, sorry, were these ones short questions?
This is short.
I'm sure you can make it work. I'll trust you.
Okay. All right, so the next one was Telmisartan, Miracle Harm Minimization Tool.
Do you want to start that again?
I'll start that one again. Telmisartan, Miracle Harm Minimization Tool for AAS users, anabolic androgenic steroid users, or a Band-Aid solution. It is, look, all drugs have purposes and are good when used in the right case. Telmisartan isn't something, or Telmisartan's what's been specifically stated by the listener, but we'll just talk about ARBs and blood pressure medications in general. It wouldn't be the first protocol I would look at if you're beginning to have issues with hypertension. Obviously, diet, cardio is going to be your 2 lowest hanging fruit that you can go to in order to manage these blood pressure issues before reaching to a pharmaceutical intervention. But at some point, if you've managed to get electrolyte intake and diet's all dialed, you're doing sufficient cardio, your cardiovascular health is good, and blood pressure is still an issue, which as you start to push these heavy body weights and potentially push into higher dose areas, if you're kind of being at a more competitive level, you will find that at a certain size and dose, you are probably going to need one regardless of how good your your diet and cardio and everything is. The majority of recreational steroid users should be able to get away with a good diet, a well calculated diet, some cardiovascular activity, and maybe some over-the-counter sups, like some CoQ10, hawthorn berry, some things along those lines. Unfortunately, a lot of your recreational steroid users aren't the ones that are super concerned about their diet and probably a little bit less strict on those type of things. From my experience, they're the ones you see reaching for the Telmisartan straight away. But really, your first port of call should always be things that you can change without a pharmaceutical intervention. So diet, cardiovascular, and cardiovascular health. If you need the Telmisartan, nothing wrong with it, go for it. But it wouldn't be the first thing I'd look at.
Interesting. We're going to find out more when we come back for the break. All right, we're back. Before the break, we were talking about Telmisartan, and Connor was explaining a lot of stuff I was completely unaware of, and you may be too. Feel free to continue, sir.
I just wanted to quickly touch on one point, which people may be wondering why Telmisartan is quite often recommended by your online kind of steroid influencers and health educators. Telmisartan is a member of the ARB class, your angiotensin receptor blocker class. This one of the two classes that we'll use as steroid users or growth hormone users is typically going to be an ARB, an angiotensin receptor blocker, or an ACE inhibitor. As steroids and growth hormone have a direct impact on the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system themselves, these are able to counteract to a degree the impact that the steroids are having on this system, almost kind of refining a homeostatic area in the RAAS system. So that's why typically you'll find that these class of drugs are more beneficial or have a more favourable outcome and less of a side effect profile to something like a calcium channel blocker or a beta blocker, which are both popular blood pressure medications in other demographics that aren't using performance-enhancing drugs. But typically, due to the direct impact on the RAS system, we will go for one of these two classes. However, it is worth being aware that both of these two classes of drugs, more so the ACE inhibitor over the ARB, does have a tendency to increase potassium retention and may lead to some hyperkalemia. So that is something that if you are going to begin using one of these drugs, that you should stay on top of in terms of blood work and making sure potassium levels aren't getting too high. They may also cause some mild dehydration as well. So not completely side effect free. Generally have been proven very efficacious and safe long term, but every drug has some negative side effects that are, that do need to be taken into consideration when commencing something like this.
Mild dehydration sounds like one of the okay ones from what I've heard so far. Mild dehydration. I feel like if I was told that, I'd be all right with it.
I think most of us are pretty mildly dehydrated all the
Not
time,
when
to be honest.
Not when we've got some thirst trap.
We've got the thirst trap.
I had to find a way to work it in. All right, so next up you have nutrition-related question.
Yeah, sort of. So this client, first of all, will say thank you. It's very flattering. But he's asked where to start specialising in nutrition like yourself. Unfortunately, I'm just a bro. I've had nearly 14 years now of training. I started tracking my nutrition when I was 13, which was 12 years ago. I'm not educated past high school. I just have a love, a real love for this, and an obsession is probably the best way to put it. And I have so since I was quite young. And I've just accumulated knowledge over the years. But to be completely honest, I'm not really in the loop for what are your go-to courses and whatnot in terms of furthering your own nutritional knowledge. Perhaps you probably would have a bit better of an idea on that. You might be able to elaborate for us.
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting conversation because everybody looks at it differently, and it applies the same way for a lot of people because you've really just got two routes, right? You can go through somewhere independently for sports nutrition, which is what I'm doing and what Tim has done as well. And I think that works a little bit better because it's more specific to what we really want to do, right? Someone will be like, I want to get involved in nutrition. I'm going to go do dietetics. And I'm like, So do you want to help people with skin conditions, and do you want to like help people be healthier, or do you want to help people have better body composition? Oh, like I want better body composition. Well, dietetics might not be the way that you want to go then, because you're probably going to end up being insanely overqualified for what you want to do, and it's going to be pretty clinical based, right? So it's kind of like if you just wanted to train people in a gym and then you went in to be an ex-phys, which some people aren't going to like, because they're going to be like, hang on, hey man, I'm an ex-phys and I work at the gym. I hate to break it to you, brother or sister, but you are overqualified. And it's probably frustrating, because if you're an ex-phys and you work in a gym, there's nothing wrong with that. You wanted to learn more, you're more qualified, that's fantastic. But to me, I think if you just wanted to be a personal trainer, specifically that, just be a personal trainer. It's going to cost you a hell of a lot less money, and chances are you're wanting to be one because you're interested in it yourself. So it's the same with you. Funnily enough, people are asking you this question, and there's people out there that might be more qualified. They could have their PhD in nutrition.
Sure. Are more qualified, 100%.
They are, right? So the fact is you have obviously enough knowledge, and what you're doing is interesting enough for people to go, I want to know what he did, but you didn't, right? You're interested in something. Yep. I think that's the other thing people need to take into account.
I've just slowly accumulated stuff over 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
If you're happy to just slowly accumulate stuff, then, you know, send me a message. I can point you in the right direction of areas to look at, studies that might be insightful. But as far as actual courses that are going to fast track you into a career and really give you information on a specific goal and client demographic, some of the courses like Jacob has recommended, like your sports nutrition, are probably going to be far more time friendly for someone like that. You're not going to acquire knowledge that I have by doing it by accident in a couple of years. It's something that I've accidentally acquired over more than a decade now.
Also, probably did a shitload wrong, because I know I did.
100% did a shitload wrong.
So that helps you
Trial
find out.
and error, for sure.
Yeah. To summarise that, if you are interested in learning about nutrition and want to be able to practice it, and you want to help people improve their body composition and maybe their health, but you don't want to do anything that's in a clinical setting, you probably just want to get a sports nutrition certificate. And on that as well, just make sure it's an insurable one. And if you go to a website that says here $799, this is our nutrition course that you can do, and it's probably not the one. It's probably just gonna be a bunch of ebooks and like PDFs and shit, and you're not going to be qualified in anything. You can put it in your Instagram bio though, so that will probably be cool if you care about that. Otherwise, you'd want to be making sure that you're doing a sports nutrition certificate or whatever they do course, and you want to make sure it's insurable so that you actually can do it, and you're actually legally allowed to do it. Otherwise, if you want to do dietetics, enjoy that, because I know a few people that have, and it is it's a whole different ball game to what we're talking about.
A few people that started and stopped.
Yeah, that seems to be the most common thing, and it is very hard.
I actually, funnily enough, did get into dietetics myself and decided not to go. Actually, to be honest, probably one of my regrets, but we live and we learn.
We do live and we learn. But yeah, that's how I would summarise that question. We now have two humorous questions. I'm looking forward to these. I think Alison's going to have a little bit of a laugh as well.
Maybe Alison can read them.
Get Alison involved. Let's have a round.
Okay. Can hypnotherapy work to get rid of my crack habit for chocolate?
I got to find. I think this is my 2 cents, right? I have worked at an electronic cigarette shop for a few years now, which people find super strange, considering I pair it with my love for personal training and health and fitness. But I myself quit smoking cigarettes to do so, and as much as vaping has a bad outlook, a lot of the people that come in quit smoking cigarettes, and then sometimes they quit vaping, right, which is good. But I have had a few people come in and say that they've used hypnotherapy to get off smoking cigarettes. They'll come in and get it for their daughter or something. Oh, I don't do any of this shit. I used hypnotherapy. And I'm like, really? That's interesting. And I used to think it was like crackpot shit. That doesn't work. But some people actually have done it quite successfully. So taking this down a serious route, I think for some people it can actually work. I don't know about chocolate, that's gonna be a hard one. But I think it does actually work for some people.
Maybe this is a case where we need you to get back to us, try it, and let us know how you go.
Yeah, and like when you come back to us, I want to be waving like a fucking Snickers bar in front of your face. Are you sure you don't want this? And I'm not interested.
Maybe we could get Connor hypnotised that every time he hears the word porta potty, he clucks like a chicken or something.
I would love
See
that.
if it works.
It'd be really good for branding. It'd be really good. I'd like that. You know what? I think I think we actually probably could work something out in that, and maybe we could do like a podcast on it. We could come back to the podcast as completely new people. You know what I mean?
So if there are any hypnotherapists listening to this and you want to sponsor the podcast, send Jacob an email.
Send me an email. They might even be able to hypnotize me through the email. You know what I mean? I've heard people can do it over the phone, all kinds of shit. What do you think, Ali? Do you reckon it's... Do you have...
I would
do you
love
have
to
any-
see it. Yeah, that sounds great. Hypnotherapy, some works on some people and other people it doesn't, so who knows?
I used to make fun of it a lot, but I think there's definitely a level, like for some people where it does work, right? I still make fun of it, let's be clear about that. But I think if it works for you, take it, right? Like, take it. You know
Just
what
like
I mean?
the carnivore diet. It works for some people. It's not really what I'd recommend for most, but if it works, perhaps we roll with it.
We've got 10 minutes left. We have to make sure we
We're
get
not
to
going to
that.
open that carnivore can of worms. We'll save that for another time.
Nah, well, I reckon we've got some time at the end. What's the next
Okay.
question, Alison?
How many scoops of pre would someone need to take if they have testosterone-related constipation?
Shout out to Kevin Lloyd, Mr. Bench.
I got nothing for this. You two must be able to answer this.
Where are you putting the testosterone to get constipated from it?
Yeah, well, where's the
doing something wrong.
pre-workout going? I know, Kevin Lloyd, given the pre-workouts I know you like, which are normally extraordinarily high stim, I reckon one of them would get most people pooing, but if you've been used to it, maybe we'll go 3 scoops for you. I know you don't get out of bed for anything less than 2 scoops of pre-workouts, so I think for you, 3 might be what's needed.
I mean, see, pre-workout's a whole other thing. I don't take it anymore, but when I did, I think it used to just ruin my day. It was like I'd go to the gym, and as soon as I had it, it was straight away I had to go to the toilet, and no one else seemed to have the same problem I did.
Well, that's my favourite part about it. There's nothing worse than going in to do a squat, not being able to do a poo before you squat. The pre-workout always brings it on. You got to clear your bowels before you get under an 800-pound squat, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean,
Like a cork off a champagne bottle?
That's it.
I never squatted more than 500 pounds, but I can tell you now, for me, the thing I didn't like is I almost felt like the pre-workout would be blue raspberry on the way in, and I felt like it was on the way out. I was like, is this stinging or what's going on? There's so much beta-alanine in this, I hate it. But the other thing, testosterone-related constipation.
I
Is this a thing?
think this was purely comical.
Oh, do you think he's...
I think Kevin might be taking the piss a little bit here.
You think
Possibly.
he might be...
Kevin,
yeah,
please
there
reach out.
There might be some mischief here. Okay, all right. Well, we've got a little bit of time left, and I think Alison's, got the privilege of having a laugh at those 2 questions, but nothing's funnier than watching Connor get passionately upset by people who refuse to eat carbohydrates. So I want to bring up a certain individual.
Yeah, let's do it.
And now I came across this guy a little while ago now, and Connor is actually not able to bring up any information about Anthony because...
I've already shared a few of his posts. I've had him in my DMs many times.
and there is a lot of really, really bad information here. So we have a clip here, and I can put this in the video as well. So this is where Anthony's talking about the fact that we do not need carbohydrates. And I'm gonna pass this to Connor, and I'm gonna get Connor to watch this little clip, and then he's gonna give us his outlook on this video because I think it's gonna be hilarious to watch his brain explode because this information upsets him.
While he was the director of the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, in order to give food that would suppress sexual urges and desires. That was his mission. He also would see parents who were bringing their children who were masturbating and wanted to stop them. People didn't want a vegan diet, but wanted a plant-based diet, give them a bunch of these cornflakes in order to suppress their sexual urges. And he would also circumcise them without anesthetic, boys and girls. He would actually cut the clitoris off of them.
You make a little bit of a response about the
Yeah,
blood sugar there. 'Cause
well-
I know blood sugar is like up your alley.
Well, firstly, there is quite a fair bit of new evidence showing that this complete elimination of carbohydrates actually can cause kind of rebounds, insulin sensitivity issues, effectively with just removing your body's ability to have to metabolize them. You end up having an inability to metabolize them long term. So, firstly, not necessarily a good long-term tool for controlling blood glucose there, as we're seeing adverse reactions to complete elimination of carbohydrates in terms of an insulin management point of view. And really, that's one of the largest single points that carnivore uses to push their diet in the first place, is the fact that it is a low insulin diet. And yes, there's no arguing that. If you don't consume carbohydrates, typically your insulin demands are going to be much lower. There is still insulin demands required for protein and to a small degree fat as well. But not giving your body its primary source of fuel. And then, as you're saying, your body keeps it in exact ratios. No, your body keeps it in bare minimum ratios. Your body keeps just enough glucose in your blood to keep everything functioning. If we're talking about performance here, you 100% want elevated blood glucose before you go on to do a hard bout of exercise. You don't want to be going into the gym with a 4.0 millimole blood glucose. You want to be going into the gym with energy in your bloodstream ready to be used by your body. You don't want to have your body make the glucose on the fly, because this is not it's not an efficient process. Look, I'm not going to completely shit on carnivore and say that absolutely nobody will do well with carnivore. There are very small percentages of people that can legitimately have a benefit from carnivore. A certain small demographic of people that just mentally aren't able to stick to a diet unless they exclude full food groups. Some people that just can't have things in moderation. If you're 150 kilos and the only diet you can stick to is carnivore, then go for carnivore. For everyone else looking for a diet that's actually kind of more towards that optimal range, you're limiting yourself micronutrients, you're limiting yourself fiber, you're putting a lot more digestive stress on your body by consuming nothing but animal products. I could just keep going.
Well, like Ali's question was like, what if you're not eating carbs? Like, what are you eating? And I guess it's like pretty basic, right? Like at that point, if you're avoiding them
Just
all,
meat and nothing else.
Look,
carnivore, the idea is mainly meat.
Yeah, and look, the funniest thing, and I think this is one of the biggest advocates to not go carnivore, is that a lot of the diehard carnivores now are diehard carnivores plus fruit. So they're effectively admitting now that it's probably not very good to just do all animal products, because they admit to not really feeling the best on that, but now they feel great that they've added fruits and honeys in. And what are they, Jacob? Simple sugars. Simple sugars.
Well, this
which
is the
release
other.
plenty of insulin.
This is the other thing, because he'd mentioned, I sent you a clip the other day, which is one of the ones I meant to find. Apologies about the other one. That was a bit much. But this one, the fiber one I sent you, remember as well, where he was saying we don't need fiber.
Yeah.
I was curious about that because that just blew my mind. I have a client at the moment.
I don't need to poo, but
This is where I want to. I have a client at the moment, and he tracked his food for a week, and all up it was between 7 and 9 grams of fiber a day, and he was listening to Huberman podcasts. He was doing ice baths every single day, and he was like intermittent fasting. So at this point, there's nothing wrong with the way he wanted to do things, but I kind of expected this way of eating to an extent avoids carbohydrates, right? But when I saw that, I was like, do you have trouble going to the toilet? No, not really. You're having less than 10 grams of fiber a day and you're eating like 2,500 calories. I'm confused by this.
look, another thing I would really put forward is a lot of people associate dysfunction with normal because it happens regularly. Just because it happens regularly doesn't mean it's normal. Could mean that your normal is messed up. If you're making a mess of that toilet bowl and it's splattering everywhere, and just because it's coming out easy doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. You may have just been shitting like that so long now that you associate that with normal and call it good. It's not how it still should look.
Everyone's normal is different.
Yeah.
And normal is just what you're used to.
Yeah.
But that just blows my mind though. I mean, how can you even not have fiber? Like, wouldn't that cause serious problems?
Your gut biome would be screwed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's-
There are lots of different metrics that fiber improve. Again, there are certain cases where the acute removal of fiber, such as I believe ulcerative colitis, on a bad ulcerative colitis flare-up, you may have somebody acutely remove fiber in order to get back on top of the inflammation. But that's simply an acute thing. That is attack this at the head, get the inflammation under control, and then reintroduce and look for a long-term solution. It's not a long-term plan, which a lot of these carnivore people are, putting out there as it's a long-term solution. It's not. It can be used as a means of acutely getting on top of something very quickly in situations like that, but it's not something you want to stay at. I can't see any reason why anyone would want to, intentionally put themselves in an environment where they're lacking entire food groups and micronutrient status purely to, stick to such a cult-based diet like that.
So what about the idea? I remember this being spoken about by Andy Galpin, and just one of the things that kind of initially made me realise that carbohydrates aren't essential. Well, that was at least the way that he put it. And he is right to an extent, though.
Yeah,
He's right. Like they're not essential. It doesn't necessarily mean that you would be in an optimal position nutritionally, but they aren't actually essential, though. And you think that's maybe why people find it easier to go down that route, right? Because, I mean, if you're having a lot of fat and protein and maybe you aren't having carbs, I started doing jiu-jitsu and probably every 3 out of 4 dudes there's doing it. It's all ice baths, saunas and carnivore diets. They're all doing it. So do you think the other side of it is that people can get away with it? Because let's face it, if people were to have a low protein or a low fat diet, you're going to get a lot more side effects from that. These low carbohydrate diets, to an extent, as you said, some people can tolerate them a lot better than others, and they maybe don't really know. As you said, the normal might be different for them. Although I feel like if I was having painful shits, that would be at the forefront of my concern. You know, that's why I stopped the pre-workout. You know, carnivore diets and pre-workout, I can only imagine how that would all go together.
Yeah. Well, pre-workout's probably the only thing keeping the carnivore stuff coming out.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the secret to 7 grams of fibre. It's 1 scoop of pre-workout per gram of fibre is how the carnivore guys do it.
Yeah. Depth charge it through.
Yeah.
Well, that's I mean, being that it's the porta potty, it's a great way to end the podcast with poo. I feel like that's a subject we're gonna.
We definitely need to do further roasting on this. I agree.
We'll make it a slow burn. Otherwise, he might get upset and block me as well.
Yeah, okay.
But look, thank you for being here today again, Connor.
Thanks for having us once again.
Absolutely. As always, Ali, it's been a pleasure as well.
Thank you.
This has been an interesting podcast. We've explored a lot of things from growth hormone and drug testing to shitting and pre-workout and a couple of other random things before that was unfortunate. I will say thank you to Alex, who's been behind the camera. Has been doing a great job today because I didn't set all this up. And I will also shout out Total Physique Performance because that's where we are right now and is fantastic. The temperature in here is good. You know, I don't feel as clammy as last time.
This is great.
Connor's
awesome. Not
dealing
sweating.
well. If you saw the clips before of Connor, it was bad. So thank you for listening to this podcast if you had so far. You can find Ped Test Australia and Bulk Gym Chalk both on Instagram as well. And you can also find Connor on Instagram as well. It's Walsh Nutrition. Is that right? Strength and Nutrition.
That's the one.
That's where you can find them as well. We will see you at the next one.